is being broadcast and is being recorded. For clarity, for those watching, voting is only permitted by members who are present in the room. Any member joining the meeting remotely is able to participate in the debate, but is not able to vote. Other than that, the usual rules of committee work apply. The first item on the agenda is apologies. May I ask if there are any apologies?
So I've received apologies from Councillor Bob Wade, Councillor John Porter and Councillor Bob Angel.
Thank you. I can see the members of the committee who are in attendance and their names will be recorded in the minutes. Please, can the clerk confirm if any members are joining remotely and if those members could confirm their attendance when the clerk calls your name?
So, Councillor Bandari?
Present.
Perfect. I think that's it. Oh, that's it.
No. This is Councillor Hayden. I'm here online as well.
Oh,
And
Councillor
Catherine
Hayden.
Neal.
Oh, yeah. And Catherine Neal? Councillor Neal?
Present.
Oh, perfect.
Is there any other member present remotely whose name is not being called? Thank you. Item 2 are declarations of interest, and the full text of the declarations is set out in your agenda. If any member has a disclosable pecuniary interest or an effective interest to declare, please indicate in the meeting's chat and I will come to you in turn. I can't see anything in the meeting's chat. Thank you. There are no declarations of interest, but I would remind everyone that you can make a declaration at any time should an item occur during the course of the meeting and at a later point. Anybody declaring a disclosable pecuniary interest will need to leave the meeting when we get to the relevant item. Item 3 on our agenda are the minutes of the previous meeting. Can I ask members if they are happy to approve those minutes as correct? As proposed.
Happy to second.
Thank you. I can see, and is everybody happy with that? I can see no objections and the minutes are therefore approved. Item 4 on the agenda are urgent items of business. I've not had notice of any. Are there any that have arisen?
I've not been made aware of any urgent
Thank you.
items.
Item 5 is an update from the local joint committee which took place earlier this afternoon, and for members' information, items 7, 8 and 9 on the agenda: the COVID-19 Health and Assessment Report, HR Policy Review, Domestic Abuse and Violence at Work, and the Annual Workforce Monitoring Report were items that were discussed by the local joint committee and were accepted at that point in time with 1 or 2 complimentary remarks, but no amendments or any adverse comments. Item 6 on the agenda are the minutes of the subgroups on pages 7 to 12 of your agenda papers. Can I ask if members are happy to accept those minutes?
Happy to accept, Chairman.
Happy to accept.
Nothing to the contrary? Thank you. Those minutes are therefore accepted. Item 7 on the agenda is the COVID-19 Health and Safety Assessment Report, which is on page 13 of the agenda pack, and that is going to be presented by Doug. Is Doug here?
Yeah, Doug's
He's online. Can you hear us, Doug?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'll now share my screen.
In that case, Doug, can I hand over to you to present your report?
Certainly can. Good evening, everybody. The reason for the report is as a result of COVID-19 and the changes with working arrangements, the report summarises the results of completions of the following: e-learning package display screen equipment, homework and assessments and returning to the office assessments, and blame vulnerable assessments which have been undertaken since January 2022. I'll go on to the report itself. Did you see that okay? So this is a summary of the returns, as I mentioned earlier, and the e-learning package was updated May 2020. So this year there's been no new vulnerable assessments as there is no longer any COVID restrictions. 38 new employees completed the DSE e-learning and 17 new employees completed homework and assessments. Total return to the office assessments was 565, and there's no longer a need from them from August, as there's no COVID restrictions either. We've got employee numbers here and the number of BAME employees within the council next. This is a breakdown from last year, from the directorate where all the BAME vulnerable assessments were done, and that was no change from last year. That's a split between BAME and vulnerable for those assessments. The new homeworking assessments were completed by 3 directorates. Some of the issues that were highlighted in them were room security, sufficient space to work, unsuitable furniture, home work surface not large enough. When individuals don't have enough space at home to work with, then they do usually highlight unsuitable furniture as well. Returning to the work assessments, this is by directorate. As I said before, there's no need for them anymore with no COVID restrictions. New colleagues can still get office chairs and monitors from home working. Colleagues are satisfied with their home working arrangements, and that's highlighted by the very few issues that people have highlighted. If anyone's home working circumstances change, then they should redo their home working assessment. And managers should look at all the assessments and take any actions that can help employees. Is there anything anybody wants to ask on that?
Thank you, Chair. You say that there's no need for a risk assessment because there are no COVID restrictions in place. That doesn't necessarily mean that vulnerable people are less vulnerable, whether due to their ethnic background or due to medical incidents. Is an assessment available should members of staff wish to opt into it if they still feel vulnerable?
Yes, it's still there on the internet, on the health and safety page, so anyone can pick that up and do it if they have a requirement to do it. It's not a problem.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Are there any other questions from any member? Is there anything on the chat?
Nothing on the chat.
No. Thank you. In that case, could I ask members if they could turn to page 13 of the agenda pack and the recommendation at 2.1. Can I ask the committee if they accept that recommendation to note the health and safety report?
Happy to propose we note the report, Chair.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Any adverse comment? Nothing in the chat. That recommendation and the report is approved. Thank you. Item 8 on the agenda is the HR policy review for domestic abuse and violence at work. And I think, Mr. Young, this falls in your purview.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members will know we're doing a review of all the HR policies at this moment in time, and we've been bringing a selection to Employment Committee for consideration. The recommendation from this is to review the revised policies as they're presented, and I can take any questions as well they arise. I think when we're doing the policy review, just as a reminder that we are working through with groups of individuals across the council, a quality group, groups of managers, and importantly liaising with trade union colleagues about the updates, and importantly also learning from some of the experiences that we've had in utilising some of these particular policies. And the two that I'm presenting today, the domestic abuse and the violence/abuse at work, are two such policies that we've actually have to implement over the last 2 or 3 years or so. And there has been some quite important learning from the experiences we've had with that, and we've actually incorporated that learning in the policy reviews. I think from a previous discussions there was some concern raised about understanding where the changes that we were looking to implement. So what we've done on the covering report is actually just identified the key themes where we have made the changes, and when there's significant rewording of the policies, we've highlighted them in red in the policies, so hopefully you can see those. First of all, I would just take the policy for the domestic abuse. There is a listing on 5.3 of the cover report there, which identifies the main changes to the policy document. Some of the key aspects of that which I would just highlight based on, again, the experience I identified earlier on, is just the added section from when both the victim and the perpetrator work for the council. That is something that we've had some, unfortunately had some experiences of that in the council over the last couple of years, of which, as I say, there was some important learning from that, how it was addressed. So that's been incorporated into this policy. And just from the initial discussions earlier on with the local joint, we have got reference here to when the police needs to be involved and informed. It references here quite often when it talks about other authorities, and what I would propose to do is just add one more line on this to actually make it absolutely transparent about the role the police actually play should any information come to light which we feel that makes an individual vulnerable. So just on that, we will add one sentence at one area of the policy which will actually just make that absolutely clear. Before I go on, so that's I just wanted to give give members the opportunity to raise any questions about the domestic abuse policy.
Does any member have any question on the domestic abuse policy before we move on to the violence at work? I see nothing on the chat and no comment from people online. So if we can move on then, please, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to the violence/abuse at work policy. Unfortunately, this is another policy where we've had some learning of this of late, where individuals have been subjected to harassment, where we've had to take some strong, firm action involving both police and legal services. So we've incorporated some of the learning from this, particularly in terms of the references to cyberbullying. So we have got more reference to that in this particular policy document. Where we've also, again, the reference to involvement from the police, what we would do under the how to respond, we would just actually make that a little bit more transparent when on situations where we would actually involve the police in these situations, because again, that's actually based on the of a comment received earlier on. But it's also, it is transparent that through these, because these are particularly difficult policies to actually manage, then throughout all of these you will see early reference to managers seeking advice from HR at an early stage, so we can make sure that the appropriate authorities have actually been advised and where action needs to be taken. I think through the previous experiences we've had, just to inform the committee that we have got very strong working relationships with legal services, and where we've had situations where individuals have been subjected to particularly cyberbullying and threats, we have actually had really very strong support from our own legal teams to make sure that that can be addressed, and also very good liaison with the police authorities. Okay, they're the two policies that we are presenting for Employment Committee this evening. So I'm happy to take any questions on the second policy for violence/abuse at work.
Thank you, Paul. Does any member have any question? Councillor Dudley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, I'm pleased to see cyberbullying has been included as part of this. When it comes to monitoring cyberbullying, how do we access people's social media to be able to investigate cyberbullying?
So that's a very good question. We've had a situation of late where we had to use our communications team in-house to actually monitor a particular website, and that was information that was shared on a well-known Bracknell Forest site, but where there are particular individuals racing on their own private accounts, it's very difficult to actually access that information. So we've relied very heavily on information coming through from other sources to enable that information to be sourced, but it is very difficult, and we've had some real issues in trying to address those issues because of the GDPR arrangements. It is a real issue. We can take strong action when the information becomes public. When it isn't public, it is a lot more challenging. So we do take advice from our GDPR lawyer and also through our communications team in that situation.
If I may, Chair, thank you. Following on from that, you know, obviously at some point it may cross over from being, if you like, employment bullying to an illegal activity, and I take it at that point we can then use the police powers to be able to go into people's communication devices. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be correct, and we have had some real situations where the police have been directly involved and have made firm actions, including arrests and of individuals that have been, where they have been subjecting to officers to harassment and threats. And the liaison we've had with the police up to now has been very, very strong on that. So yes, that those actions would follow through.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dudley. Are there any other questions? Anything online? No? Fine. In that case, could I ask members to turn to page 25 of the agenda pack, recommendation 2.1. I will move the recommendation that the Employment Committee having reviewed, agrees the revised policies for domestic abuse and violence at work policies with the additional comments that Mr. Young made during his presentation of the domestic abuse policy relating to the police.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. We will now move on to item 9 on the agenda, which is the annual workforce monitoring report. this is our annual chance to really get into a lot of data. Mr. Young.
Thank you, Chair. As indicated, there is a lot of data on this particular report. Just as a reminder to the committee, the Council are required to publish this workforce monitoring report, which includes all the equality data for Bracknell Forest Council for the year up to the 31st of March 2022. I think the comment in terms of the amount of data on here is a good one. I know when we had the discussions around the corporate management team, there was a thought and a view, are we trying to make this too complicated and complex? And certainly since those comments made, we have actually started to review how other councils present this information, and there probably is an opportunity to actually just make it a little bit clearer. And that's something that we would look at addressing moving forward. The document to be published incorporates, as I say, an awful lot of information which covers all the equality strands. There's just a couple of things I wanted to highlight to the committee. There is an action plan from this which identified the progress made from the last report, and that is shown at 5.5 on the progress. So the committee can see some of the actions that we're taking as far as that's concerned, and we're also addressing this through the equality group within the council. The information is clearly identified there in terms of some of those activities, but one of the areas in particular that I just wanted to also share is that we're actually looking at, as I mentioned, that review of the other councils in the area's approach to this to see if we can actually get this in a more easy to read version and certainly a reduced version, because I think other councils have prepared this information just as the numeric data on a sort of 3 or 4 pieces of side of paper. A couple of things to note from the report, and one of the discussions we had at local joint was in reference to age profile of the council, of which there's clearly an indication to do with the challenge of how we would put an ageing workforce, and these arrangements are coming very strongly in terms of the work that we're doing with managers on the workforce profiling, and those arrangements are actually being undertaken within the departments. And one of the ways we're looking to address this, and I've highlighted some of the actions in previous committees about the role of the apprenticeship roles within the council, which we are really pushing. We've had some real success in one particular department within the resources department over the last 3 or 4 months, where we've had 6 apprenticeships, newly appointed apprenticeships starting, and that's something that we want to continue to push and grow. Through those activities also, we're extending our profile within the local secondary schools by attending 6th form sessions with the students to be looking at careers in local government, and giving people the opportunity to ask questions about how they can get into local authority work across a number of sectors and a number of professional roles within the council. Other than that, I think there's where we've got the information on the disability profiling. It is actually on page 66 of the agenda pack. I think there is still an awful lot of information where we need to try and work harder to obtain that detail and that information, because we've still got over 50% of individuals that haven't identified whether they're actually disabled or otherwise. And whilst we have done a number of communications over the years, and individuals can access this information and just update their system and the iWorks at a relative ease, we've still got a large number of people there that haven't provided that information. So that's something that we're going to ask for a reminder when we send an update out in the new year. Other than that, all of the other aspects of the report cover the responsibilities for the equality monitoring as far as the council is concerned. So I wasn't going to go through any of the particular details of that unless there are any particular questions from councillors.
Councillor Ann?
Yeah, I'm just curious on page 62 where you've got the age profile. You were saying about the our aging profile, shall I say? But I don't understand quite why for the first 30 years they do it every 10 years, and then they break it down into 5-year groups from 50 to 65. Because that seems counterintuitive, because essentially the 50 to 59s are the biggest cohort, but when you look at the graph, it doesn't look like that because you've split them into 5-year groups. Is there a reason why they're done like that? I mean, why don't we do 40 to 45 and 40 to 44 and then 45 to 49 and stuff like that?
The explanation to that would be based on the fact that retirement age, and it's to try and break that down. But again, I think the point you make is a good one in terms of how it's presented in the report, because it does skew it a little bit. So we can revisit that. But as far as the workforce planning arrangements is concerned, we want to look at that in terms of having an assessment of people that may well be approaching retirement age and having that broken down. So there isn't any reason why we couldn't just actually, I think that information is quite useful for workforce planning, but we could look at doing the breakdown for the earlier years on a 5-year basis as well.
I just think on a graphical, when you look at it, it's not, when you just look at that chart, you think, our worst, the area where we have the biggest cohort is 40 to 49, which is not actually the case. So I think it misrepresents graphically where you are.
That's a fair point. We can look at that.
Any other questions?
I'd be interested to hear more.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Chairman. Currently, what areas are we offering apprenticeship opportunities in? And are there any other areas that we are already considering, or any areas that we are not considering doing apprenticeships in for specific reasons? And how are we communicating accessible working opportunities to actively encourage people with disabilities and additional needs into the workforce and or the apprenticeships that we are offering?
First of all, the apprenticeships, we are pushing across all of the service areas for apprenticeship opportunities, and particularly concentrating on those areas where we're struggling and challenged in our recruitment activities. But we've done some sessions in the lexicon over the last 9-12 months or so, when the strongest, the noisiest approaches in terms of people actually wanting apprenticeship roles within the council. So I would say that there isn't anything out of bounds as far as the apprenticeship roles are concerned, and we're looking at all options and seeking. And we've looked at these in terms of social care, in the finance team, in the audit team. We've got apprenticeship roles that have been newly established within the HR team. There's a new apprenticeship role. I think we're doing what we can to make sure that we are spreading the word across the council to be looking at these opportunities. So the message is that there is no roles in the council that we wouldn't look at having the apprenticeship role as an opportunity, unless we can't get any apprenticeship roles established. And that the wider aspect of that, we're also working with our schools to be looking at apprenticeship roles in schools and for teaching. The second question to do with the accessibility, it's something we could look at, because we've got incomplete information, as I've mentioned earlier on, to do with that within this monitoring report. As it stands at the moment, all of our recruitment activity does incorporate some information about what we do for accessibility and for those workers. And we do, whilst we don't comply, I think at one stage we had the 2-tick arrangement where anybody that matched the specification, the essential requirements of the specification, were absolutely guaranteed an interview. We still apply that, but the 2-tick symbol, as far as I'm aware, doesn't exist anymore, but we still apply that for our recruitment activity.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Dudley.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to look at profiles and the split of staff that we have within the council. It seems as though we're doing a great job with regards to the BAME community, and that we've got, you know, a higher percentage of BAME employees than the population that we serve. So that's a good thing, and a good mix. However, the gender profile seems to be somewhat skewed, unusually in most companies, I think, towards female staff, which of course, you know, but it would be nice to have a more balanced profile. You know, we want to reflect the community that we serve. And the graph shows that Bracknell Forest is more or less 50-50 as far as gender. Now, I note that it says on the bottom here that it's the highest proportion of female staff is within the people department, which is consistent with social care being a female-dominated profession. Well, I think I take issue with that. I don't think that we should be publishing a document to say that something is a female-dominated profession. Especially in the last meeting, we were talking about trying to attract more social care staff. And if somebody reads that and saying, I'm a male social care member of staff, and do I want to go to a council that recognises it's a female-dominated profession? Is there something we're doing about that? You know, because we need to be balancing this, I think.
Yeah, I think that's based on the information from the social care and the Social Work England arrangements, that certainly the highest proportion of people working in social care are female, and that is a national picture. So we're just reflecting what that national picture is. The question in terms of what we're doing about it, I think it's an important one, because I do think there is an opportunity to be really looking at, and that the work we're doing with the students in the sixth form is actually very much so that this is a profession that is open to male and female. But it's one of those areas that we can look at addressing and see if we can actually have any particular recruitment campaigns that does focus on trying to increase a more equal gender profiling within social care. It is certainly something, even from the qualifications and people going through university for social care qualifications, it's heavily weighted on females. So it is a national picture, but there's aspects of this that we can be looking at, and whether we should be addressing and looking at different ways of recruitment to see if we can actually start levelling that up a little bit.
Excellent, thank you, Chair.
Are there any further questions? Nothing online? No. Before we move to the recommendation, Paul, can I just follow up on what Councillor Allen was saying about the age histogram on page 63? Is there any reason why we can't take his point? Because while you've been speaking, I'm doing a bit of sketching, and it would completely alter the perceived profile, actually, and it would emphasise the importance of recruiting in whatever way, training, whatever you want to put it, at the lower end of the age bracket. Is there a reason why we can't put an alternative vision in it?
We can certainly change that. There isn't any reason. We've got all the details. So on the one that we look at presenting on the website, we can amend it to have that so it is a true
I
representation.
think that would be a good idea. If you then wanted to sort of do a subdivision to identify the higher age range, is fine. But just, you know, I've been sketching it, and it does actually make a significant difference. Okay, fine, thank you. With that alteration then, on page 53, could I move recommendation at paragraph 2 that the Employment Committee note the report and approve it for publication on the Bracknell Forest Council website in line with our statutory responsibility.
Seconded, Chair.
Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Any to the contrary? Nothing here. Fine, thank you. That is approved. Accordingly, members, that finishes our agenda. I thank you all for your attendance, both in person and online. Declare the meeting closed.
Thank you.
Will you tell us when we're offline, Will?